this has been months in the making. It's a big deal, like you say. And what made us look into it is the fact that Olympic swimming, so close to Paris, the the rumors we heard, the stories we heard about potentially half the Chinese Olympic team um, failing a doping test. I think any journalist in the world would be mildly intrigued by that.
Absolutely. How difficult was it to sort of dig down into it and find out what had actually happened?
Yeah, it was quite a complicated process because it required very brave people in a way as well to come forward, try and speak with us, that'd be whistleblowers, getting hold of documents, which I think is the bread and butter of this kind of thing. And then, there's a lot of science involved here and a lot of legal procedure, which can be quite kind of Byzantine, arcane, and to get through all of that. And in some ways, the anti-doping world, the anti-doping code, the way it's written, it's quite hard to navigate, even for athletes. We found there have been several athletes that have been caught up in this net who'll be looking at this story and saying, hang on a minute, I lost my career here. I didn't do anything wrong. I got suspended for a number of months. I missed this event. So why did I suffer? And how come these guys, look, we're not saying they were doping intentionally. Nowhere in our story have we said that. But what we've said based on the reporting is a process that should have taken place seems to not have. And there needs to be a degree of transparency for people to believe in clean sport.
And those are two really great points you made. The inconsistencies of how these rules are administered and that clarity, that transparency. Firstly, what did China's team, what drugs were they found to be taking?
Yeah, so what was found in the test, so there were 23 swimmers at a national championship in January 2021. So we're talking 3 years for this story to come out. And the drug in question was a trimetazidine, a prescription heart medication for people with angina. The kind of more colloquial term for it is TMZ, or in America, TMZ, if you will. And why that's interesting is cast your mind back just a year or two to the Beijing Winter Olympics. The kind of star of that Olympic Games, or the person who was supposed to be, was the 15-year-old ice skater Kamila Valieva. She wowed the crowds and billions at home, but then was found to have tested positive for the same drug as these Chinese athletes, and also in a very, very low concentration, slightly higher than these, but not a therapeutic amount. So people were wondering, the book was thrown at Kamila Valieva. She was splashed all over the newspapers. WADA appealed the case and got a 4-year ban. This is the same drug in low concentrations, yes, but under the terms of the rules, this is a drug. It doesn't matter how much of it that is in your system is potentially a anti-doping rule violation.
Yes, and sort of strange that there would be so many numbers. China has offered an explanation of contamination, is that correct? And contamination cases have happened.
They have, but never for this drug. So that we need to be clear about that as well.
Okay.
And look, the Chinese investigation, if you were to look at that, was very, very thorough. The Chinese anti-doping agency, CHINADA, in fact, said it's so big they had to call in Chinese state security services to help them. We can all imagine how much power a Chinese state security operation will have to dig to the bottom of anything. So a lot of curious things happened. These tests were taken in January. The positives were not found on the system until March. So March the 15th, it turns out. So almost 2.5 months later. And it took another 2 months for these authorities to find that this drug in small quantities, very small quantities, were found in traces in a kitchen in a hotel where these athletes were competing in a competition. Now, you'd be wondering, does nobody clean the kitchen for 2.5 months? Because we've been wondering that as well. There were COVID-like conditions, so maybe there was lockdowns and things like that. That explains some of the delays. But, still, WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency, said it will do exactly the same again. They had a 1 hour and 45-minute press conference the other day, but there's still more questions than answers. And I think that's what the sporting world and swimmers, be they in Australia, in the US, in Britain, or anywhere else in the world, will be wondering, can we believe what we're seeing? And this is the issue. Had these tests been made clear way back when, in 2021, before the Tokyo Olympics, before some of these athletes went on to win medals, including golds in Tokyo, some of this controversy might not exist. We'd be able to understand the fact that this story has been dragged out and published after 3 years, and now we have these agencies in reactive mode. That doesn't sit well with a lot of people.
And also, I think, you know, there are feelings sometimes that China is the big country that nobody wants to annoy, and that China's officials might pressure world bodies, which may not be correct at all. Is it that it's falling down from Eduardo's point of view? After all your reporting, where do you think the system is falling down?
It's a good question. I think, and you make a good point. We shouldn't just be pointing the finger willy-nilly at bad China, because, you know, that's not fair and that's not correct. However, China does pose particular risks. For example, random anti-doping tests that athletes all around the world are subject to. It's quite hard for foreign testers to go into China and make unannounced visits, for example, because you have to get a visa, you have to kind of knock on the door and say, we're coming, and that isn't quite the same elsewhere, where you can move around perhaps a little freer without that sort of surveillance. Now, you talk about WADA. Yes, I think they still need to answer a lot of questions. There is certainly an optics problem for them in terms of, do they have the wherewithal and do they have the will to treat everyone equally and to do their jobs, no matter how big the problem is and no matter how big the country is. Let's not forget, China was going to host the Olympic Games in 2022. So imagine saying half of your swimming team has tested positive for a banned substance. We're going to suspend them. What a scandal that would have been. And maybe they were afraid. I don't know. But it's, again, these are questions that people have raised. And also, the whole point here is transparency.
And also, you know, that some of these swimmers and athletes might be at the Paris Games, and people, you know, we've seen Australian swimmers take exception to the fact that there isn't transparency and the testing isn't the same for everybody.
Well, there is a sense of that. And I'm pretty sure some of these athletes are going to be at the Paris Olympics, and that pool deck will make for interesting viewing, how athletes from other countries, be they Australian or elsewhere, interact with these guys, whether they think they're in for a fair fight. Don't forget, these people have been training their whole lives for this moment.
Yep.
It is such an important thing in the lives of athletes all over the world, including the Chinese. Now, as long as everyone thinks there's a fair competition, they will go towards these events with positivity. But I just think now there is going to be an air of negativity that hangs over the Paris Olympic swimming competition. Absolutely.
Tariq, really appreciate you joining us and taking us through the work you've done. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Beth.